Alright, so I've had the Switch 2 for over 2 weeks now, and in which time I've played it basically every single day. And after that time, I can confidently say that the Switch 2 is a mixed bag. And now, don't get me wrong, some of the improvements they've made have been massive, but I can't help but feel for every 2 steps forward they've taken with this, they've also taken a bit of a step back. So let's talk about that, starting off with the screen. So the screen is better than the original in almost every way. It's bigger, higher resolution at 1080p rather than 720. We've got higher frame rates, 120 Hz. We've got HDR as well, which looks great. So that part is arguable, but we'll forget about that for now. And games look absolutely beautiful in here. It's really bright, really vibrant. However, it is LCD and not OLED, which isn't going to be a big deal for 90% of people. But there's no getting away from the fact that it is a downgrade from OLED. While it's a particularly good LCD screen, it still just can't replicate the same depth in colour and blacks and shadows that an OLED can. I'm incredibly fortunate to own a nice OLED TV, an OLED Steam Deck, and an OLED Switch. I know I have an issue. Leave me alone. And the difference between those screens and this one is subtle, but it is noticeable, particularly when you look at them side by side. And I think Cyberpunk's a really good demo for this, as the game is very dark and shadowy with lots of blacks, but then also has these big pops of color with neon signs and explosions and stuff. And when I switch between handheld mode and using it on my TV, I do notice a drop off. It just doesn't have the same sense of depth and vibrancy that you get with an OLED. But this really isn't a major issue. Like I said, I think a ton of people are going to love this screen, and I don't have an issue with it. But when we're talking about moving on from the Switch OLED and talking about other competition, it does just feel like this strange step backwards. Do you know what I mean? And I want to say this now because I'm hearing a lot of reviewers say oh, the screen's an OLED, but that doesn't matter. And while it kind of doesn't, in a couple of years from now, we'll undoubtedly see a Switch 2 OLED and everyone will be banging on about how good OLED is. And I just think it's a shame that we haven't got that here now. And on the topic of the screen, oh my God, it scratches so easily. I have looked after this thing better than a newborn baby. I've cradled it, cared for it, raised it as my own. And yet after docking it 10 times, it's managed to get these little micro scratches right down the center of the screen. I can't capture it on camera, unfortunately, but it's there and I notice it. And at first I was just really angry at myself. I thought I must have just knocked it and not really noticed. But after looking into it, it appears that thousands of other people were having the same issue. Nintendo had this inbuilt screen protector which stops the glass from shattering, but it's a soft plastic which is incredibly fragile. Go and watch JerryRig's video about it and you'll understand that just the slightest little scratch from something marks this screen protector, which would be fine if you could take it off, but it voids the warranty and Nintendo don't recommend that you do so. So I can swallow spending £400 on a console, but not when it has such a massive and obvious design flaw like this. 10-year-olds are gonna annihilate this. And if you're going to get one, I highly recommend slapping on a screen protector before you even turn it on. But beyond the screen, the gaming experience is massively improved. Games look beautifully detailed, 1080p and handheld support looks great, and 4K on dock to the TV equally just looks incredible. Also with higher frame rates with games like Mario Kart World and Tears of the Kingdom running at 60 FPS with a little help from DLSS, Pixie Dust. And these things come together to make a genuinely modern Nintendo console at long last. Honestly, playing Zelda at 4K 60 FPS is a holy experience, and if you haven't played those games already, now is the best time to go and play them. They look so good on Switch 2. And games like Cyberpunk look incredible, completely mind-blowing that they've got the game to look this good on a handheld. Performance mode runs at 40 FPS. The graphical detail, the general performance, and the overall experience of playing this game is head and shoulders above something like the Steam Deck. And you even get better battery life out of it too. A lot of this is down to the developers in how much time and effort they've put into optimizing it for this platform. And I think the Switch 2's future is really going to depend on this, how well the developers support the platform and optimize their games for it. Oh, and I have to say, it runs all these games while being silent, not whisper quiet or it's hard to hear. it's dead quiet. Like, after playing Cyberpunk for 2 hours, it doesn't even make a hum. Like, it's crazy, and it doesn't even get warm either. Like, if you tried to run Cyberpunk on a LCD Steam Deck, it would literally scream at you and feel like you're holding a radiator. And now, although a lot of games have received upgrades or updates that make it so that they run a lot better, that doesn't mean that every single game in the Switch library is going to get the same treatment. A lot of original Switch games are going to run just like they did on the Switch 1, maybe with some better frame rates, with slightly better performance, but there won't be any real notable differences until the developers go back in and upgrade those games, and there's no knowing like if and when those developers will do that. Unlike with handheld PCs where you can dial in your own settings and performance and make any game run how you want it to, within reason. But with great power comes great power consumption.
Stop lecturing me, please.
And these more demanding games are going to take up way more battery life, with games like Mario Kart World only getting 2 to 2.5 hours, which for like a big flagship release does feel pretty low, especially when you compare it to the original Switch's 3 hours and 15 minutes on Mario Kart 8 on release, and between 3 and 4 hours on the OLED model. And things get even worse in games like Mario Odyssey. Tech Divers did this really good video diving into the battery testing and stuff, and he found the Switch 2 is getting 2 hours and 46 minutes compared to 5 hours and 27 minutes on the OLED Switch running the same game. And that is a big difference. Like, we're not talking about 10 or 20%, we're talking about over 50% difference in battery life. Yikes. And again, I understand why this is the case, but it's another one of those things that just feels like this weird step backwards. So moving on to the ergonomics and the sort of controls and the feel of the console, again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. The bigger Joy-Cons do help feel your hands, and the bigger buttons and joysticks do feel great. And all in all, the console does feel like really premium. It's got this like lovely matte texture on it, which makes it feel like lovely to hold in the hand, and just feels like a more upmarket handheld. The magnetic Joy-Cons feel really satisfying and sturdy to snap on and off. And the whole thing just feels like really sturdy and well made. But because of the bigger battery, bigger screen, more beefy internals, it does get considerably heavier, 34% heavier to be exact, which is a totally fair compromise, I think. But that combined with the complete lack of any kind of grip or ergonomics on here, and it makes it pretty uncomfortable to play certain games. And don't get me wrong, on games like Mario Kart, where you're using the ABXY buttons and the left joystick predominantly, it's fine. But in games like Cyberpunk, where you're constantly using the right joystick to look around and aim, it's absolutely horrific. Like, to bend my thumb at this angle for more than like 10 minutes is incredibly uncomfortable and very unnatural, and yeah, it just makes it like impossible to aim and really feel like immersed in the game when your hands just cramping up the whole time. And this wasn't so much of an issue with the original Switch because it's so light, it almost feels like it just kind of like floats in your hand. So moving around feels like uncomfortable but much more manageable. Whereas the Switch 2, because it's that bit bulkier, and it feels like I'm just constantly fighting with the console to use the controls properly. And that combined with the incredibly short joysticks does just make it incredibly difficult to aim and look around in any kind of first-person game, unless you get a grip, which I did get, which does help considerably, but that still doesn't even come close to how comfy and natural it is to play on something like a Steam Deck. There's a reason that basically every handheld PC looks super clunky. It's because it actually feels nice to hold, you know. But now I totally get it from Nintendo's perspective. They wanted to keep it sleek and minimal, and it looks beautiful, and the Joy-Cons work great as two controllers. Like, still magical that they've come up with this design. But why would you not at least offer some kind of like pro Joy-Cons? Like, you've already done the hard work in creating a pro controller, which is incredible, by the way, like one of the best controllers I've ever used. Just split it in half and make pro Joy-Cons. All the cool kids are doing it, and I know third parties are going to be all over this and make their own ones really soon. But I just don't know why Nintendo, an innovative company, wouldn't at least give its own option for this. I think they'd sell an absolute boatload, and it would go a really long way, I think, in trading blows with the competition. But there is a little bit of a light side in this, in how well the Switch 2 uses gyro. In Cyberpunk, for example, when you aim down sights, it activates this light gyro, which you can use for like micro aiming, and it works so well. Playing FPS games, particularly when you're docked with the controller, feels so satisfying. I'm not great at aiming with joysticks, but suddenly with this gyro feature, I'm sniping, hitting headshots like Ninja in his prime.
I'm not seeing enough movement.
Is Ninja still going? Is that what you kids still watch these days? And I know gyro controls aren't anything new, but it just feels like how it's dialed in and utilized here feels really, really good. And now coming on to what I think is one of the most interesting, very like clever design choices is the mouse mode. It works shockingly well. Like aiming just feels really natural and precise, and it all just works really well. And I actually think this configuration is way more intuitive than a mouse and a keyboard, because I think it's much more comfortable to use the joysticks for movement as opposed to like WASD and spreading your hand like a spider. I've used it a ton in Cyberpunk, and it is honestly just so sick. I feel like I'm much more like accurate. I feel like more immersed into it because I can control like I would on my PC. Genuinely kind of like upsets me that I can't use this kind of configuration on everything. But again, there is a bit of a downside in that because of the complete lack of grip, playing this for more than 10 minutes is very uncomfortable. And pressing the buttons on the side, particularly the analog stick inwards, just often makes the mouse like collapse backwards or sideways. And now this problem would be easily fixed with a mouse attachment grip thing. But oh wait, Nintendo don't sell one. My friend is currently 3D printing me one, and you can buy third-party ones, but god damn it, Nintendo, do you like not want my money or something? You've taken enough already. And now in terms of release games, it's really disappointing, to be honest, in my opinion. The only new games we're getting are Mario Kart World and like Survival Kids, I think. Who are you trying to market this to, Nintendo? Children? And yeah, this does for me make the release feel pretty flat and underwhelming, particularly when you compare it to a release like the PlayStation 5. Although I have to say, Mario Kart World is absolutely fantastic. Not only can you play as Cow, but you can drive Cow into a truck and then drive that truck into the competition. 10 out of 10. Best gaming experience I've ever had. But to be fair, by Christmas there is going to be a lot more, and I kind of think this was Nintendo's plan, like get all the sweaty 30-year-olds and the scalpers to buy it up on release with just one game, and then by the time the Christmas rolls around, when most people are going to be buying it, mainly kids, the supply chain would have caught up, and you're going to have things like Metroid Prime, Dusk Bloods, Pokemon, Donkey Kong. So maybe that was their plan. I just think it's a shame we didn't get like Dusk Bloods, or at least just like one newer game for the release. That would have felt like there was more to get your teeth into. But you do obviously get the entire Switch library on here, so if you haven't had a Switch before and this is your first time jumping in, there's going to be a ton of games to play. But if you're coming from an older Switch, there's not really much new here. Although Cyberpunk is great, but again, it is like a 5-year-old game now. So in conclusion, I do like the Switch 2. I think it's going to do very well. I think a lot of people are going to love it. I think they're going to sell an absolute ton of these, but I still do feel like there's quite a few issues here that are just like frustrating, a lot of which could have been quite easily fixed, I think. But at the end of the day, this is one of the best handhelds you can currently get. And because of its platform and how well it's going to sell, I do think a lot of developers are going to get behind it and design and optimize games that work on this really well. Hopefully. I hope we don't have another 9-year life cycle on this current gen, as I do think in sort of 5 or 6 years time we're going to really see its age with how quickly handhelds are developing, particularly with the sheer amount of competition on the horizon. If you're thinking about getting one, my advice would be to wait until the end of the year, as by then there's going to be a ton more games to play. Third parties would have caught up with a ton more really useful accessories, and for the love of God, buy a screen protector. Have you guys got one? There's like so many varying opinions like flying around at the minute. I'd genuinely be interested to see how you're finding it so far. What do you think? All right, cool. Cheers. Subscribe, I guess. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you later. Cheers, guys.